Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Rink-Side with Hits and Clips. Well, as you can tell, we've been on a little bit of a break when it comes to releasing videos. I was doing a little bit of research on our previous videos that we've recorded and uploaded, and obviously, with the hockey season being between September and February, a majority of our recordings and uploadings to YouTube have been between February and August. And that's where I feel like most of our videos are going to be launching more this coming year. After episode number 4, you will see another video after this regarding the relocation update of an AHL team, but we will get to that further once that video comes. But in the meantime, let's get started. Well, we did end up doing interview recordings with the Port Perry Lumberjacks GM as well as the GM of the Clarington Eagles. However, based on our busy schedules and scheduling conflicts, we were just unable to release that publicly to our audience. We will have interviews with those GMs once again. However, we're going to do re-records when we get closer to September again, just for a little bit more of a refresh conversation. It'll be both me and Zach interviewing the GMs of both Port Perry and Clarington. We also want to get interviews with both Georgina, Schaumburg, and Caledon. Now, if you haven't been following the PJHL season, that is right. The season has come to an end. The playoff matchups are set. So the Uxbridge Bruins, who finished first overall in the Orr division, will be taking on the Caledon Golden Hawks in the first round of the playoffs. The Georgina Ice will be taking on the Schaumburg Cougars. The Port Perry Lumberjacks will take on the Lilburn Merchants. And then the Clarington Eagles will get a bye to the second round. So stay tuned. We will do a full update and recap of the first round of the PJHL playoffs when that time comes. But in the meantime, I did want to do a little bit of a update of the overall season standings and what occurred for the Uxbridge Bruins as they finish off the regular season and go into the first round of the playoffs versus the Caledon Golden Hawks. Well, just yesterday on the Uxbridge Bruins social media pages, they released a franchise record posting. And that's right, the Uxbridge Bruins, they won a franchise best of 35 games they won this season. And that beats the 2018-2019 season where they only had 33 wins. In 2001-2002 season, they had 31 wins, followed by the 2009-2010 season, where they had 31 wins also in total. So again, that is a franchise record for the Uxbridge Bruins this season. Just a phenomenal performance, an outstanding accomplishment for the Uxbridge Bruins this season, as not only did they finish first in the Orr division, but they also finished second overall in the PJHL league. So that is very impressive. So the Uxbridge Bruins, they came very close to defeating the Georgina Ice on the road at the Georgina Ice Palace on Sunday afternoon. They just fell so short, but in a shootout. And to finish off the 2025-26 season, they finished with 71 points. And as mentioned, they finished with a franchise record this season with 35 wins. Now, there is one team in particular I want to talk about in the OJHL. Now, the OJHL is obviously, as many of you are probably familiar with, I grew up in the OJHL with both the Markham Royals and the Stouffville Spirit before I joined the Uxbridge Bruins of the PJHL. And speaking of the Markham Royals, they are one of the teams that are fighting for that last playoff spot in the Eastern Conference. Well, the Markham Royals, they currently have 40 points overall in the league. They currently sit ninth, right behind the Lindsay Muskies and just ahead of the Aurora Tigers. Now, the OJHL season is expected to go a little bit longer than the PJHL season. The OJHL season is expected to go about 10 days just after the first day of March, which should finish off the season. And that does give the Markham Royals a little bit of time to catch up and try and catch and pass the Lindsay Muskies for that eighth and final spot in the East. However, I'm wondering if it's going to be enough. The Markham Royals, they've played against some pretty strong opponents, And just recently, this past Sunday, they lost to the Aurora Tigers 4-3 on home ice. And the Aurora Tigers obviously sit right behind them. So I'm curious to know if the Markham Royals are going to catch the Lindsay Muskies. Unfortunately, Aurora will not make that pass as they only sit at 36 points. But I think it's possible. Trenton, Stouffville, Pickering, Newmarket, Halburn, and Wellington have all clinched in the East, where the Toronto Patriots, Collingwood, Milton, Leamington, Burlington, King, the Buffalo Junior Sabres, and Mississauga have all clinched in the West. So the West is pretty much determined now for the OJHL. The Patriots will face off against Mississauga in the first round, Collingwood versus Buffalo, Milton versus King, and Leamington versus Burlington. So that's going to be some pretty interesting matchups. Trenton, if Trenton does finish in first, which it looks like they will either get Lindsay or Markham in the first round. Stouffville will get St. Michael's, Pickering will get Wellington, and then their first inaugural season back into the city of Newmarket, the Hurricanes will take on the Halburn County Huskies. And so, yeah, just getting back to the Royals, do I think they can pass the Lindsay Muskies and take that final eighth spot? I think it all depends if the Royals can pick up some wins. If they can, and the Lindsay Muskies just somehow aren't able to catch up and pick up some more points of their own, I think the Royals can catch them. But again, we're almost hitting the midpoint, end of part of February. So I think if the Royals can put something together and catch up to Lindsay, I think they're able to catch that eighth spot. But again, it all depends what happens, not just with the Royals and getting their own wins of themselves, but also getting wins of their own for the Lindsay Muskies too. Now, I haven't really been following as closely with the CHL surprisingly this season, just because I've been working in the university athletic leagues this season, and so it's been kind of tough to follow every single league, every single team that's been going on. However, we're going to recap a little bit what's been going on between the OHL, the WHL, and the QMJHL. I have a little bit of some details to talk about for the WHL and OHL, but so we're just going to cover a little bit of the QMJHL just for now. Blainville, Drummondville, Rouyn-Noranda, and Shawinigan have all clinched spots in the Western Conference for the QMJHL. And then in the East, Moncton, Chicoutimi, and the new expansion team, or I should say the new relocation team for the Eastern Conference of the Newfoundland Regiment, they have clinched their spot in their first inaugural season. Well, as we know, the Moncton Wildcats won the QMJHL championship last year over the hosts of the Rimouski Oceanic. Well, Rimouski isn't doing the best this season as they currently sit in ninth, just below St. John and just above Baie-Comeau. However, Moncton Wildcats, they are looking strong as ever, sitting at first in the Eastern Conference, so expect a really long playoff run for the Wildcats again this season. And as we switch over to the Western Conference, we know that the Kelowna Rockets are hosting the Memorial Cup this year, and that's the first time since 2015, and I would know that because the Oshawa Generals won the Memorial Cup in Kelowna that year. And so the Kelowna Rockets obviously hosting it once again this year. But what are they looking like going into the WHL playoffs? Well, not a very bad season for Kelowna. They currently sit fourth in the Western Conference. They just sit below Prince George but above Kamloops. But man, what a first inaugural season for the Penticton Vees. We talked a little bit about the Penticton Vees, the new expansion team that came over from the BCHL just before this 2025-26 season began. And so Penticton, they currently sit with 35 wins at the moment and 78 points, second in the Western Conference. As for the reigning WHL champions, the Medicine Hat Tigers are looking to protect that championship, and they continue to make it two in a row. Well, they currently sit second in the Eastern Conference, below Prince Albert, but above the Edmonton Oil Kings. And it's interesting, Prince Albert gave Edmonton a pretty strong run last year in the playoffs. Prince Albert was able to pull out that victory over them. As we know, the Edmonton Oil Kings, they were that last seeded team to make the WHL playoffs last year, and they currently sit third this year. So Edmonton is looking much stronger going into the playoffs. And Medicine Hat's sitting strong in that second spot in the Eastern Conference, looking to obtain that strength going into the playoffs and continuing on from where they were last year, where we kind of look at a little bit of the opposite if we flip over to the OHL. We know the London Knights and the Oshawa Generals facing off in the OHL Championship Series last year, and London going on to win the overall OHL. They would go off to Rimouski for the Memorial Cup. Well, it might not be that guaranteed this year, as London currently sits fifth in the Western Conference of the OHL. And man, I think this is a season that all Oshawa General fans want to forget, as they currently sit in last in the Eastern Conference, and it's just a total rebuild at this stage for the Gens. As not only that, but the Brampton Steelheads, they're also down there as well. So we thought this would probably be a strong season for Brampton as well. Maybe taking that advantage, as Oshawa hasn't been doing great this season. But no, Brampton hasn't been doing great. Even Sudbury, they're down in eighth spot in the Eastern Conference. Kingston in seventh, Niagara in sixth, North Bay in fifth, and Peterborough in fourth, which only leaves currently at the moment three teams in the Eastern Conference who have officially clinched the OHL playoffs for this year. The Brantford Bulldogs sitting in first with 84 points. The Barrie Colts right behind them in second place with 80 points. And then just behind them are the Ottawa 67s in third with 79 points. As we look into the Western Conference, the Kitchener Rangers sitting top in first with 80 points. And then just behind them, looking tight as ever, tied at 79 points even, are the Flint Firebirds and the Windsor Spitfires. The Erie Otters and the Sarnia Sting currently sit last in the West, but Owen Sound, Saginaw, and Guelph all sit currently behind them, with the Sault Ste. Marie Greyhounds and the London Knights, who have officially clinched that OHL spot in the Western Conference. So if anyone saw my video from last year where the Oshawa Generals were taking on the Brampton Steelheads in the first round of the playoffs, I went to Game 5 in Oshawa, and they were obviously able to close out that series in Game 6 in Brampton at the CAA Center. Unfortunately, there will not be a playoff video in Oshawa this year, since they will not be making the playoffs, and it's just a total rebuild for the Gens. I was very fortunate enough, though, to work the Carriage Cup for the Ontario Tech Ridgebacks at Tribute Community Center this year, though, and that was a real pleasure and an honor just to work in that venue and just get a sense of what the vibe is like when a game is hosted at Tribute Community Center. And so the last topic of this video we're just going to recap is the NHL. Now, currently at the time of this recording, and probably at the time when this video gets released, the NHL is currently on the Olympic break. So the Olympics are currently going on right now, and this is probably a good time just to recap the NHL, since there are no games happening at this current stage. And so we'll just look at the current standings of where all the teams are at, and just some of the big trades that really stuck out to me in the most recent NHL trade deadline. And currently, the NHL trade deadline is supposed to take place on March 6th this year. So more trades are going to be taking place, but something to look out for in the coming weeks. Well, if you're a Toronto Maple Leaf fan, it's probably not the most thrilling season for you, as you're not probably looking very tight at the standings, as I think a lot of Leaf fans were. The Toronto Maple Leafs currently sitting sixth overall in the Eastern Conference, and well, they're just four spots out of a second wild card spot, sitting behind Ottawa, Washington, Columbus, and Boston. Buffalo currently holding that first wild card spot. In the Atlantic Division, the Tampa Bay Lightning, the Montreal Canadiens, and the Detroit Red Wings all looking very strong, seen in those three third spots of the Eastern Conference. As for the Metropolitan Division, Carolina, Pittsburgh, and the New York Islanders. We're going to talk a little bit further about the New York Islanders affiliate team, because they might be having some relocation alert updates going into next season, but that's for the next video. Could we see the Edmonton Oilers back in the Stanley Cup playoffs? Absolutely. They are looking strong as ever. If they were to make it all the way to the Stanley Cup finals, do I think they have a chance? I think they really do because the Florida Panthers are not looking as strong as they did last year. They will not be going back to back to back, as the Florida Panthers currently sit eighth overall in the Eastern Conference and two spots below even the Toronto Maple Leafs. So I don't think the Florida Panthers will see a playoff appearance this year, but hey, anything can happen. But we'll see what it looks like because I think if anybody was to have a strong playoff appearance, no doubt it's going to be somebody in the Western Conference. You just look at all the strong Western opponents that are sitting in the NHL standings right now. Colorado, I mean, as you can tell from the thumbnail image, I mean, Colorado has just been on a roll from the start of the season to now. Obviously, we're on the Olympic break, but Colorado is like lighting up the league. And if I had to choose somebody from the Central Division who may make a playoff appearance, if it wasn't the Dallas Stars, 100% it's the Colorado Avalanche. And look out for Cal McCarr, Nathan McKinnon, and those feisty Colorado Avalanche as we go into the Stanley Cup playoffs this year. Now, the Minnesota Wild, they do look like a strong opponent, currently seen second in the Central Division of the NHL playoffs. And the Dallas Stars, I mean, they're the Dallas Stars. What can you expect? So Mason Marshment, who was a former Dallas Star himself, who made multiple playoff appearances with Dallas, was then traded to the Seattle Kraken, and now he currently plays with the Columbus Blue Jackets. Is that a reason why the Columbus Blue Jackets are currently sitting fourth in the Eastern Conference? Maybe, but I really do believe Mason Marshman's overall performance is what has helped contribute to Columbus's success this season, and it's a reason actually why they sit third in the overall Eastern Conference standings. Washington currently sits fourth. Now, let alone Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas, Edmonton, and Vegas. We got some pretty strong opponents that are creeping up, including the newly expansion of the Seattle Kraken, the newly relocated Utah Mammoth, and a team that we haven't even seen in the wild card spot for, it almost seems to me like decades, are the Anaheim Ducks, the mighty Ducks of Anaheim. Currently sitting below them are their rivals of California, the Los Angeles Kings. But a team that's very surprising that was sitting in that wild card spot for a pretty lengthy time was the San Jose Sharks. And I mean, you just cannot count the San Jose Sharks out at this stage, even though they currently sit fifth overall in the Western Conference and three spots below the wild card. Hey, San Jose has just been on a run, continuous run. They've been winning overtime games after overtime games. They've been, making miracle games happen, down 5-1 in Pittsburgh, and they ended up winning that game, I think 6-5 in overtime. So, what a dominant performance for San Jose. So, do not count the San Jose Sharks out. This is a team you're going to really want to keep a close eye on as we head into playoff contention mode. But even if we look down further into the Western Conference standings, just below San Jose, we have Chicago, and then we have the Winnipeg Jets, who were, it seems like every single year, the Winnipeg Jets were at the top of the NHL with the Washington Capitals. And well, Winnipeg, it just has not been a strong season for them. I kind of think you could put the Winnipeg Jets and the Toronto Maple Leafs in the same boat this year. They've just been so strong, but it just seems like they might be getting closer into a rebuild mode. Just look further past the Winnipeg Jets and you got more Canadian teams aside from the St. Louis Blues who sit in ninth, but the Calgary Flames sitting in eighth and the Vancouver Canucks sitting in 10th. Now, based on the thumbnail image that I posted, could the Winnipeg Jets maybe be in a rebuild? Maybe, but I think Winnipeg has a little bit more left in the tank that they could build on for a playoff run. Whereas the Calgary Flames and the Vancouver Canucks, I think just those two teams who were close to the wild card spot last year, as you look back on the standings from last season, those two teams could really benefit if they were to take a step back and just rebuild from a stage of their own. Especially Calgary, I think Jonathan Huberdeau has not worked out in Calgary. I think trading Matthew Tkachuk to Florida was a big mistake for that franchise. And I think Dustin Wolf holding the fort for the Flames overall, it's just not going to help Calgary get back into the playoffs if Calgary does not rebuild for a team of their own. Where I'm a little bit surprised with the Vancouver Canucks organization, where I think trading away Quinn Hughes was, I don't know. What do you think, Vancouver fans? Do you think trading away Quinn Hughes was a mistake, or do you think that was something that Quinn Hughes was hoping to just take that next step in his NHL career? Maybe eventually hoping to land in New Jersey so he could play with his two brothers. Leaving Vancouver maybe was something that the Vancouver Canucks need to take in their organization for that next step. Maybe Elias Pettersson is someone that you need to consider of what his future looks like, and maybe Thatcher Demko. I mean, Thatcher Demko has been great in between the pipes for the Vancouver Canucks, but maybe, Vancouver needs to also look at some goaltending possibilities, as maybe if they don't make the playoffs, you need to at least hope that you claim that potential first, second, or third round draft pick, especially with you sitting in last in the Western Conference. So I think that's something Vancouver fans and the organization will have to consider moving forward, especially with all the renovations that have been going on within Rogers Arena, doing a major upgrade to that venue. And I think just if you've upgraded the venue, you've really, taken a whole nother look to your uniforms. But I think if the Vancouver Canucks can really capitalize on enhancing their franchise, and even if it's as hard as it's for even for me to say as a Vancouver fan, just take that rebuild, with teams like Calgary and Winnipeg not doing the greatest right now. Maybe you let those rival teams who are still, since they are not in a playoff spot right now, maybe just take this time to rebuild, maybe, enhance a little bit more of your minor guys from the affiliate team of Abbotsford, and then just rebuild and see what you can come up with. So I think in terms of the overall NHL standings for this particular Vancouver Canucks team, just take a break, just, don't completely cut the wire on your franchise, but just, do anything that you can to give your fans at least a little glimpse of hope going into next season. Now, to just finish off this video, I'm not going to recap every single previous NHL trade that took place this season, but just highlight some of the major ones that really stuck out to me. One of those being the Mitch Marner trade from Toronto to Vegas. And, I don't think Toronto got a lot in return, to be honest. I think they really missed out. But at the same time, when you're playing in Toronto, I feel like there's a lot of pressure on you, especially from the fan base. Where if you go to a team like Vegas, everyone loves you, you might be a fan favorite, but even if you're someone like Mitch Marner, you blend into the team, but you're not someone that is constantly monitored 24/7 by the fans. And so I think Mitch Marner going to Vegas was a great move. That was a great organization for him to go to. I don't think Toronto fans are going to be entirely pleased with that result, but with where Toronto currently sits, could the Leafs be in a rebuild? And I think the question and the answer to that is yes. Maybe not this season, maybe not next year, but I think maybe in the 2027, 2028 season, that's where you're really going to see the Leafs at the bottom rebuilding, just like the Boston Bruins have been doing. Where if you look at the Boston Bruins right now, they currently sit second in the wild card spot, which is actually not that bad considering that they were last year. And some teams, they take forever to rebuild. You look at teams like Anaheim and San Jose, and even Buffalo for that matter. But look at Buffalo and Boston now. They currently sit in the two wild card spots in the Atlantic Division. So you have to think maybe there is potential for the Leafs. But I think one player, in my personal opinion, who I think is maybe a little bit overrated is Austin Matthews. I know Austin Matthews is a fan favorite in Toronto, and I know he may be the captain of the team, but I do not see that guy staying around in that organization for too long, especially if, you have a team leader, you have someone who's looking to lead this team into great success. And if he's not doing that and he's not, performing at his best every single game, that may come down to the point where you have to trade Austin Matthews. Now, look at the goaltending. Goaltending is not the greatest in the entire National Hockey League, I have to admit, but it is pretty decent. But it just seems like it's the same old story every single year, and Toronto really needs to think what they're going to do in the years to come. Now, one trade that really stuck out to me in particular was Quinn Hughes being traded to the Minnesota Wild. It was on December 12th when Quinn Hughes ended up getting traded. And so, in return of that trade for Quinn Hughes being sent over to Vancouver was Marco Rossi and Liam Ogren in that trade, as well as a first round pick in the 2026 NHL draft. So, did Vancouver get a lot out of what they were expecting? Probably not. I think Vancouver could have got a little bit more in return, but from what Quinn Hughes was hoping to succeed in, I don't think a lot of his success was going to come in Vancouver, especially with the Canucks currently sitting in last in the Western Conference right now. I think that if Quinn Hughes does not stay in Minnesota, I think the goal, not only for Quinn Hughes, but also for the New Jersey Devils organization, is to get all three brothers to play with that Devils organization. So I think if it's not this year, maybe next year, we might see an appearance of Quinn Hughes going to New Jersey. I think the biggest question of it all, though, is what are the New Jersey Devils going to give Minnesota in return? Because if you currently look at the NHL standings for the New Jersey Devils, well, they currently sit ninth in the overall league, where compared to last year, they were sitting like what, in third or second in the overall Eastern Conference. So maybe this is a time where New Jersey really needs to consider their options. You're not sitting in a wild card spot, and frankly, you may not even be making the playoffs, especially with being below Toronto and Florida for that matter. But if you're going to consider a playoff run, maybe you might want to look at what options you could give Minnesota in return to acquire Quinn Hughes. But considering what Vancouver gave up for Quinn Hughes to send to Minnesota, I don't really know if New Jersey has a lot in the tank that they can give them, while also at the same time keeping the brothers of Quinn Hughes. So it's going to be interesting to see what the New Jersey Devils will give up and what the Minnesota Wild will return if Quinn Hughes was to head to New Jersey. So that being said, everyone, that is just a recap, a winter recap update of what's taken place this past season in all the OJHL, the PJHL, the OHL, WHL, QMJHL, and the NHL. Obviously, there's much more updates, much more content that will be released. Zach is currently on vacation at the moment, so him and I won't be doing a recording until he gets back. But we wanted to release more videos. That's our goal, is to release more videos, especially as the hockey season winds down. That's usually compared to, according to our previous videos and the content that we've released in the past over the past 2 years, it seems like February, March till August, September is generally when we tend to release most of our videos, and that is the goal. So, hey everyone, if you love our content, we would really appreciate if you could subscribe to our channel so you don't miss any videos like this, any content that we might release. We talk about all leagues, all teams. If you have any suggestions, we would love to create a video on whatever team, player, or league that you would want us to talk about. Be sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss any videos like this. Be sure to like this video if you found it any interest to you. And hey, if you have any opinions, suggestion, ideas, we get your comments right away. And so we will respond to them, whether it's through a video, through a live stream, or just simply through the comments. We love to interact with anyone who comes across our videos and our content. And we look forward to the videos that will be released in the coming days, weeks, months, and we really hope that you will tune in and be a viewer and a subscriber to our channel. So thank you everyone so much for tuning into this video, and we will see you in the next one.